16-hour flight to dock with the International Space Station at 8:15 p.m. tonight, Eastern Daylight Time, all in one day.
Yes, it is a long day.
You know, when I think about them getting ready to fly, I think about the story that I've heard you tell about that flight uphill. You'd gotten, past the tough part, right? You've lifted off, crew 2 is in space, and you felt like everything was okay. And then there was this sudden alarm.
Yes.
Can you recount that story?
Sure. Well, actually, it was kind of, again, a very long day. You're exhausted for a lot of reasons, and it was at that time our bedtime. And so we'd been given the go to dress into our pajamas, pull out our sleeping bags, and basically hunker down and try to get as much sleep as you can before the rendezvous begins the next day. And we got the call from Sarah, our core, to say, hey, we're tracking an object that's potentially going to get too close to you. We need you immediately back in your suits and put everything away. You have, I think it was 15 or 20 minutes. And so that was an immediate scramble to do exactly what she had said. There was no time to really think about it. We had to just go right into the drill of practicing those motions that we had done, of course, at home. And our awesome mission specialists, Aki and Tama, got Shane and I into our suits and strapped into our seats, and then got themselves suited, and then had to put absolutely everything away. Every t-shirt, every sleeping bag, every sock, everything. And that was a tremendous amount of work under time pressure. And just as they got the last, zipper zipped and buckled, we got the call that said it was a false alarm. And there was not actually an object out there on a trajectory with us. So it did feel a lot like the simulator that the sim soup had just maybe seen, that we were done with the task and was ready to move on to the next thing.
Wow.
But it was a good practice. It got our hearts racing.
What an experience, thinking you might hit something in space, but actually it was a false alarm. It was something that was improperly entered into the system. There was nothing there.
That's right.
But you trained for that,
right?
And you were ready for it.
We were.
Thank you for sharing for that.
Sure.
All right, let's check in now with Hawthorne and go out to California for a status on both vehicles. Andy, what do you have for us?
Thanks, Daryl. We've had a smooth countdown so far, and the SpaceX team is working no issues as the pace begins to pick up. We heard that the crew had left the pad, and so right now it's just the crew inside Dragon. For Falcon 9, our two-stage reusable rocket, final propulsion checkouts of the first and second stages, and the engine began just a few minutes ago in preparation for propellant loading. Now, this involves testing and cycling valves as well as engine pneumatics pressurization. At the T-minus 45-minute mark, the team will report their readiness for propellant load with a final electronic go-no-go pull. Now, before we can begin starting to load propellant on Falcon 9, we do have a few more tasks to perform. First, we need to retract the crew access arm away from the Dragon capsule to its launch position. That's going to happen between the T-minus 44 and the T-minus 42-minute mark. With the arm out of the way, the launch escape system will be armed, and once these two events are complete, Dragon will be ready for Falcon propellant loading. We'll also verify with the launch weather officer that weather meets all the constraints. These include items such as wind speed, lightning, and precipitation. We do expect acceptable weather conditions for launch at both the surface level and upper altitudes, though. Range is currently clear for launch from historic launch pad 39A. Worldwide network of ground stations and the tracking and data relay satellites are ready to support Dragon as it heads into orbit. Today, we do have an instantaneous launch window at 3:52 a.m. Eastern Time. Once we begin loading propellant, there is no opportunity to change to T0. The timing for Dragon to rendezvous with the International Space Station is very precise, down to the second. So we do only get one chance at it today. The good news is we are at T-minus 1 hour and 1 minute and counting. Everything is looking green, so I'm going to send it back over to Jesse.
That's great news, Andy. Thanks for the update. Today's launch marks the fourth time a rotational crew will fly on a commercial spacecraft, and each of our crew members brings a diverse set of experiences to today's flight. Kjell Lindgren is commander of the Crew Dragon spacecraft and the Crew 4 mission, responsible for all phases of flight from launch to reentry. Kjell spent most of his childhood abroad and returned to the U.S. to earn a doctorate of medicine from the University of Colorado. Board certified in emergency medicine, Shell served as the deputy crew surgeon for STS-130 and Expedition 24. He also flew on Expedition 44 and 45, logged 141 days in space, participated in 2 spacewalks, and more than 100 different science experiments on station.
And Bob Hines is the pilot of Crew Dragon Freedom today, and he's going to be responsible for spacecraft systems and performance, and he's second in command for the mission. He's also going to serve as a flight engineer for Expeditions 67 and 68 on board the station. He was born in Fayetteville, North Carolina, earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Aerospace Engineering from Boston University. After he graduated from there, went to the U.S. Air Force Test Pilot School, where he was awarded a Master of Science in Flight Test Engineering, and then went on to complete a Master of Science degree in Aerospace Engineering from the University of Alabama. A lot of school. In 2012, he was selected as a research pilot at NASA's Johnson Space Center, and then in 2017, got the call to become an astronaut candidate.
Jessica Watkins is a mission specialist for Crew 4. This will be Jessica's first trip to space following her selection as an astronaut in 2017. As a mission specialist, she will work closely with the commander and pilot to monitor the spacecraft during the dynamic launch and reentry phases of flight. Jessica earned a bachelor's degree in geological and environmental sciences from Stanford University and a doctorate in geology from the University of California, Los Angeles. At the time of her astronaut selection, she was a postdoctoral fellow in the Division of Geological and Planetary Sciences at the California Institute of Technology, where she collaborated as a member of the science team for the Mars Science Laboratory rover Curiosity.
And our fourth crew member, Samantha Cristoforetti, also a mission specialist for Crew 4 from the European Space Agency. In 2001, she graduated from the Technical University of Munich, Germany, with a master's degree in mechanical engineering with specializations in aerospace propulsion and lightweight structures. And she also attended the Euro-NATO Joint Jet Pilot Training Program at Shepherd Air Force Base in the U.S., where she earned her fighter pilot wings in 2006. She was selected as an ESA astronaut in May 2009, and then in November 2014, launched from the Cosmodrome in Baikonur, Kazakhstan, before returning to Earth in June of 2015 after spending 200 days in space. Then in 2019, she went on a different mission, NASA's 23rd Extreme Environment Mission Operations, also known as NEMO, a 10-day stay in the world's only undersea research station, Aquarius.
Each of these 4 crew members will join Expeditions 67 and 68 once they arrive at the International Space Station.
All right, well, we are under an hour away from launch, so we're getting into really the exciting part of the countdown. We heard that the crew, the closeout crew has left the arm, they're out of the area, and we're getting closer to propellant loading and some of the really exciting moments. SpaceX's Crew 4 mission is the company's 5th crewed spaceflight for NASA. We had the Demo 2 test flight and 3 previous operational crewed missions to station. This is also SpaceX's 7th crewed spaceflight overall, including the Inspiration 4 mission as well as the AX-1 mission, which just recently came home.
Today, our crew is flying the newest Dragon in our fleet, and we'll be taking a ride on board the Falcon 9 that supported the CRS-22 mission in June of last year. Now, it's been a great countdown so far. As Andy has been saying, weather has been looking really good for T0, and again, the excitement just continues to pick up as we get closer to the T0 mark.
It's gone really smoothly so far today. If you joined us at the very beginning, we started with Suit Up just over 3 hours ago, where the SpaceX team helped the crew put on their suits that they're going to wear for all of the launch operations and did the initial checkouts, suit leak checks before they got to the crew walkout. And that's where Chell, Bob, Jessica, and Samantha gave some final goodbyes and some waves to folks gathered outside the operations and checkout building before they climbed into the Teslas and began that roughly 20-minute ride out to pad 39A.
And we did watch as the crew boarded their Teslas and headed down the NASA Causeway, headed towards the launch pad. Once they arrived at the pad, the crew took a moment to enjoy the view of the vehicle they will be taking flight on this morning, and then headed up the fixed service structure.
SpaceX, we are cycling orbit tank isolation valves to equalize low flow pressure.
Freedom copies.
Just some comms there between the crew and the ground. And again, as they headed up the fixed service structure, they began the process known as crew ingress, and that's where the astronauts entered the Dragon spacecraft. The SpaceX team then performed a series of checks to ensure the suits, seats, and vehicle interactions were all functioning properly.
Yeah, they made their way two at a time down that crew access arm, and then getting in one at a time into the Dragon spacecraft. We saw Shell and Bob make the walk down first, followed soon after by Samantha and Jessica. And they were helped into the vehicle by that closeout team, which a little while ago we did hear that they made their way off the crew access arm. They were able to close the hatch with the crew safely inside, execute the side hatch leak check, and so we're less than an hour to go now. And so things are going to start to really pick up as we go through a series of go-no-go polls to arm the launch escape system and then start propellant loading.
The crew poll for readiness was completed at the T-minus 60-minute mark, and the Dragon poll for prop loading is coming up here at about T-minus 55 minutes. And then after that, we'll be at T-minus 45 minutes. There will be an internal mission control
Freedom
poll.
SpaceX, at this time you are go for Section 6. When you're ready, please report go for launch.
Copy, Freedom is go for Section 6, and put that to work.
Again, just pausing for those comms between the core and the crew for astronauts. At T-minus 45 minutes, we will have an internal mission control Hawthorne poll and then the launch director's poll for propellant loading. Now, when we get to about the T-minus 40-minute mark, the crew access arm will retract and the crew will get the call to close their visors and to arm the launch escape system. Now, that's the automated safety system in place that can fire the 8 Super Draco thrusters on Dragon to quickly separate the crew from the rocket, either on the pad or during the flight on the ride uphill.
And then once we reach 35 minutes before liftoff, propellant loading for Falcon 9 will begin, loading fuel and oxidizer on both the first and second stages on Falcon 9. So we'll continue to get views of the crew. They're going to get ready to report their readiness for launch. They're in their suits throughout this entire phase. But for right now, we are just standing by for these final polls, and then we'll get into propellant loading. So with things starting to pick up, let's send it back now to the teams in Florida. Over to you, Daryl.
All right, thank you, Dan. And since we last saw you, our team has grown. Check this out. So Megan MacArthur and I want to welcome a group of NASA social participants onto our launch broadcast. They are standing behind us and all around us. Guys, welcome.
Thank you.
So you might ask, what are NASA social participants? This is them, and they are stoked, and here's what they've been doing. NASA puts out an open invitation to social media influencers who engage in STEM and science communication to come out to Kennedy, and you're looking at the pictures of some of the stops they went to around Kennedy. They tour this multi-user spaceport in the days leading up to launch, and it ends with a rocket launch. They get to see it as close as you can possibly get, the same distance that the media and VIPs get to watch it. So I know you guys are excited about that. NASA social participant Camille Calabeo is otherwise known as the Galactic Gal on Instagram. And so you're here with all of your NASA participants, and I want to ask, first of all, how's it going so far?
It has been absolutely amazing. So this is actually my first NASA social. I started my platform during COVID, so we haven't had NASA socials since then. And it has been absolutely incredible. I know we had a delay, and so some of us went home, some of us stayed. We got to come back. We got to see so many things, and I have gotten to meet so many wonderful people from all different walks of life. And some of them are artists, some of them are foodies, some of them are space influencers, and so it's just been really phenomenal to be here and get to experience this with everyone.
Absolutely, and each one of you represent a substantial audience that you're communicating with and sharing the science, which we appreciate so much. So we're so glad that you're here to do that. What's been the favorite part that you've done so far?
That is a really hard question. Everything has been absolutely amazing, of course. But I think the best part for me has been, or was, getting to see 3 different rockets on their pads at the same time. And it really just solidified to me what a time to be alive, right? You see SpaceX with Starlink, then you see SpaceX with Crew Dragon, and then you see SLS and Orion taking us back to the moon. And that was just really incredible to see that right here with my own eyes.
Totally. And you guys got lucky, really, because there was a launch last week. You've seen 2 launches. We have NASA socials that don't get to do that. So good on you for seeing that. What is one of the more challenging aspects, would you say, to communicating science in this day and age?
Yeah, I think communicating science on social media is challenging for a couple different reasons, but I think one of them is that people just don't have long attention spans anymore, right? You get 30 seconds of people's attention a lot of times. So most of my content is actually on TikTok and those types of really short videos, and you get 30 seconds, and that's really hard to communicate effectively, educationally, and engaging, right? You have to engage your audience and keep them engaged for those 30 seconds that you get. And I think for space specifically, it's challenging because space can be criticized a lot, especially from the general public that might not be otherwise connected to space. And so I think just really communicating why are we doing this and why it's really important to humanity and life on Earth.
All right, well, the Galactic Gal, I want to give you an opportunity to ask a question of a NASA astronaut, Megan MacArthur. Put you on the spot.
Oh, you put me on the spot.
What one question would you ask an astronaut?
Okay, so this might be cliche, but I'm sure we have a lot of young people watching, and I would really love to hear from your perspective as a female astronaut. What is something that you would recommend to somebody, say, 5 years old?
Well, I think what I recommend to kids of any age and any gender is to figure out what it is that you love to do. Be curious and try new things, right? Don't decide just one thing. At 5 years old, I'm going to do this one thing, right? Because there's so many other amazing experiences to have. So be curious, ask lots of questions, find that thing that you love to do, and then pursue it and get really good at it.
I love that. Thank you.
All right, while we have all of these social media influencers here, we want to reach out to our social media influencers and people who are using it out there in the audience throughout the show. We've been taking your questions at the hashtag AskNASA throughout the night. We have time for a few more before Falcon 9 fueling begins, and you can see it in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. This one from Megan. While on the space station, what was your biggest accomplishment?
That's a tough one. I think for me, meeting the challenge of every single day, meeting the schedule every day and whatever that brought was really the challenge, because every single day was different. Some days were easier than others. Some days were really hard. Some days you really had to lean on your crewmates. Some days you really were helping out your crewmates. So it was that maintaining that even keel for the entire 200 days, and I'm calling it 200 days, I think was the biggest challenge.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And so to imagine, for me, like, what was the most funnest thing about space? Floating around?
Oh, gosh.
I mean, this woman was floating around in space.
You know, it's the camaraderie, right? It's the silly times that you have with your crewmates, the ideas that you come up with. One day, Aki and I took our zero-G indicator, which was a baby penguin, and I taped it to a balloon that I had blown up and then released. And so then the balloon, of course, was slingshotting all over the inside of the U.S. lab with this tiny penguin, you know, with his flippers up and he's zooming around. So stuff like that when you have some downtime, you know, it's a little bit science experiment. It's a lot fun, and it's really great team building. So it's all of those things at once.
And it's a lot of hard work as well, because the astronauts are doing a tremendous amount of research there. We're going to talk more about that a little bit later in the show, dive into the ISS stuff that's going on right now and in the future. But for the moment, we want to thank our entire NASA social team for Crew 4 being here. Y'all are fantastic. Yeah. Very good. Let's now check back in with Andy at SpaceX in California.
Thanks, Daryl. It is T-minus 47 minutes and counting. The SpaceX launch teams are finishing final review of data from checkouts of Falcon 9 over the last hour. The launch director is about to poll the team for readiness, both to load propellant and to launch. And the exciting thing is this is the last poll before we lift off. The 7 SpaceX engineers indicate they are go by electronically voting on the online countdown procedure. The launch director also checks in with Dragon mission director and NASA launch manager to make sure that they are also ready. Earlier, you saw the vehicle assembly building called the VAB. The Falcon and Dragon launch team, as well as key NASA launch members, are in the Launch Control Center adjacent to that VAB. They have a view straight towards pad 39A, and they're able to see Falcon 9 and Dragon.
And the team is ready for crew
through the large
arm
windows
retract
of
for
Fire
phone
Room
loading
4.
and launch. For non-urgent no-go conditions, brief the CE or LD and then approve aborting the countdown. For urgent issues affecting the safety of the operation, operator shall call hold on the countdown net. Launch control abort the launch auto sequence immediately and proceed into the launch abort sequence. At T-minus 10 seconds, launch control will be hands-off, relying on automated abort criteria for the remainder of the count. Operators advise the launch director whether structural breakup or fire is imminent or occurring per Dragon manual escape flight rules. In the event of a fire alarm, key operators noted below will remain at their post while the alarm is evaluated. In the event that personnel safety is threatened, evacuate to the south-facing emergency exit, which leads directly outside. Launch control, you may proceed with arming the crew for movement.
Awesome. So we heard at the very end of that there that we are proceeding with the crew arm movement. So that access arm that is adjacent to the vehicle, that's going to start to move to its launch position.
Operators in Fire Room 4 and MCCX, the control will be in a lockdown state until launch escape system is disarmed.
It does take a few minutes for the crew access arm to fully retract, and after that we'll be arming the launch escape system. So on screen you can see the Dragon capsule with the crew access arm still in the surface position. The crew is on board.
Access arm retraction has started.
So great, we got an amazing shot of the crew access arm retracting away from the Dragon capsule. So again, this is going to take a few minutes to fully retract, and then the next major activity is going to be arming that launch escape system of the Dragon vehicle. So far, weather and range continue to be go for launch. We are monitoring the clearance area around the launch pad as well as air and sea space around the flight corridor. Here at Kennedy Space Center, the conditions are predicted to be acceptable for liftoff just about 43 minutes from now. So with that, again, everything is going smoothly on today's countdown. So I'm going to send it back over to you, Daryl. How are things going?
All right, thank you very much, Andy. And the countdown clock continuing at T-minus 43 minutes and counting. I want to recap a few things here for you. The closeout team. They have left the White Room and exited the blast danger area. They are no longer in the picture there that you see. Also, SpaceX teams have pulled go for the LES arm and prop load. That's the launch escape system. And SpaceX Dragon Freedom reports go for launch. And so here we are at T-minus 42 minutes and counting. We're standing by for the next major milestone. We saw the crew access arm retract, and that's one of the last major visual milestones that we'll see in preparation for liftoff. And then shortly thereafter, we'll hear
crew access arm retraction is complete.
And there is the call out that the crew access arm retraction is complete. And so now we're looking towards propellant load. Megan, the propellant loading into the Falcon 9 rocket, this is a big moment. Not a lot of rockets load propellant with astronauts inside the crew capsule.
That's right. This was a new capability that was developed for this vehicle to reduce, I think, overall the timeline. And it's something that the combined teams looked at very closely together from a safety perspective during the development of this vehicle. It's one of the reasons why the launch escape system is so crucial to have that arm. This is a very dynamic activity that's happening, and so we want to be able to keep the crew safe in the event that something phenomenal happens. So that launch escape system being armed is coming up, and that's definitely something that I remember the Demo 2 crew telling us to expect, a loud noise associated with that pressurization of those lines. And so that is something that we were ready for and expected.
How about that? You could hear the pressurizing of those Draco engines?
Yeah, it was not quite instantaneous, but a short duration, very loud sound is what I recall of pressurizing of those
Freedom
lines.
SpaceX for launch escape.
Freedom standing by.
At this time, I can give you a go for Section 7, close visors and arm launch escape system.
Okay, Freedom copies. Our visors are closed and we are arming the launch escape system.
So what does he do to arm that?
It's a command that is sent to make that a valid exit strategy.
And as the pilot, you're there, next to the commander, keeping your eyes on all the systems?
Basically, yeah, agreeing with him when he's sending commands that that's the correct thing to be doing.
When that propellant is loading, can you tell? Can you hear it?
So I thought a lot about that and kind of polled my crewmates and other people I know that have flown. Bob says that he recalls a gurgling sound. What I recall is more of like a whirring and clicking of the valves moving. So I think everybody's recollection is slightly different. And I had a similar experience on my shuttle flight.
Dragon, SpaceX launch escape system is verified armed.
All right.
Freedom copies confers.
My memory of the sounds that occur on the spaceship are not as good as my visual memory. And so I think everybody remembers, a slightly different overlapping set of things.
And so we just heard that call out, Megan, that the launch escape system is armed.
Yes.
And now that paves the way for the loading of propellant.
That's right.
The propellant, of course, super chilled liquid oxygen and RP1, which is a refined kerosene for spaceflight. A look from high above, from the launch tower down onto the Crew Dragon spacecraft and rocket below. That booster getting ready to fly for the 4th time. We got the LES call a little early, so as far as the schedule is concerned, we're running ahead. But we're in a good place because propellant load starts at T-minus 35 minutes.
And the crew will, while they're not actively involved in the propellant loading activities, they're going to be pretty closely monitoring, when the different activities start. Loading the specific tanks with the specific propellants so that they can have a sense of where the vehicle is at every moment.
A live look there at the base of pad 39A, the launch tower, and the strongback, which is part of the transporter erector. It is in the foreground. The rocket is just
Falcon 9
behind
propellant tanks will be venting for propellant load in approximately 1 minute.
Okay, there you heard in 60 seconds. Venting those tanks in advance of the propellant load. It's 3:15 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time here on the Florida Space Coast. The overnight launch will light up the night sky here in Florida. The spacecraft at the very top, it's a new one. Crew Dragon Freedom, named by the crew. Although parts of it are being reused. The heat shield, the material from the heat shield. It's the first time they've used the composite heat shield structure, reused it on a Dragon, which is just another advancement in SpaceX's reuse capability. We're able to put flight loads on it to test it and qualify it. NASA has approved it, and it's ready to go, which is interesting because it's seen the saltwater environment, right?
Right.
But they found a way to get that ready for another go.
Yeah, it is. It's remarkable. And that qualification program that you mentioned, very strict. Obviously, it has to be very thorough with multiple teams of people making sure that all of the requirements are met so that there are no safety impacts to reusing these pieces of hardware. But how transformative, really, to be able to reuse pieces that in the past would not have ever been used again, to really bring down the efficiencies and the costs and ultimately the reliability as we are able to use flight-proven hardware over and over again.
Absolutely. And now here we are just a few seconds away from propellant load. Thinking about the Crew 2 mission as we look forward to Crew 4. When you were up on the space station, it was quite the time up there, right? I'm thinking about the visit from the Russian film crew.
We did have some visitors.
A movie.
That's right. So they came up, an actor and a producer came up on a Soyuz and spent the 10-day time period filming a movie, almost exclusively on the Russian segment, but we were able to interact with them in the evenings. We would occasionally have dinner parties, as we do up there, and so we would get to chat with them a little bit and hear about their lives and hear about their plans.
Was that interesting?
It was very interesting. They were lovely people. They were very gracious guests.
Propellant load has started.
There you hear the call out that propellant load has begun. A big milestone. As we are sitting at T-minus 34 minutes and counting. But you were saying, Megan,
yeah, so it's nice to have some new faces, quite frankly, and to hear some new stories. And like I said, though, we really did not work with them. They worked exclusively on the Russian segment, and so it did not disrupt our ongoing science work that, of course, we're doing that's so important for our international partners. So I think it would be difficult to carry out a movie production as well as carry out the actual work of the space station.
Just another example of the continued private use of the International Space Station, and I guess you didn't photobomb their shot?
I did not. No, I stayed safely behind the camera or in the other room entirely.
We are now T-minus 33 minutes, 57 seconds and counting away from the second launch of a Crew Dragon with people on board in 2022. Today will begin the next 6-month rotation mission to the International Space Station. The launch escape system is armed. That happened just before we started loading the propellant onto Falcon 9. The Dragon capsule, though, it was loaded with its propellants about a week and a half ago, just a few miles down the road at a facility SpaceX calls Dragonland. In order to fly, Dragon needs a fuel and an oxidizer. So for the fuel, SpaceX uses monomethyl hydrazine, or MMH, and nitrogen tetroxide, or NTO, for its oxidizer, and together those propellants feed the Draco engines that maneuver Dragon on orbit, as well as the 8 Super Draco engines that would power the launch escape system in an abort scenario. And now that fueling for Falcon 9 has started, that means the 8 Super Draco engines inside Crew Dragon are ready, if needed, to pull this capsule away from the Falcon 9 rocket in an instant, should there be any kind of emergency associated with a rocket on the pad, or if there was a problem with the pad. The NASA and SpaceX teams have trained extensively for exactly that type of contingency, and they are ready. Now let's head over to SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne for an operations update. Andy?
Thanks, Daryl. We are continuing to count down those final minutes, and everything is still looking good for Falcon 9 and Dragon for an on-time liftoff just about 32 minutes from now. At the T-minus 35-minute mark, we heard that propellant loading began on Falcon 9. This is going to continue until about the T-minus 2-minute mark. The first and second stages of Falcon 9 are each loaded with 2 liquid propellants. One is fuel loaded into a tank at the bottom of the stage, and the other is an oxidizer loaded into a tank at the top of the stage. The fuel we use to power the Merlin engines is a refined kerosene referred to as RP1. The oxidizer loaded on each stage is a densified liquid oxygen. We also refer to that as LOX. Densified means it is kept much colder than typical for launch vehicles and takes up less volume, and this basically allows us to store more oxidizer into both of the stages. To ignite the fuel and oxidizer in the Merlin rocket engine, we use an ignition fluid called T-tab. When T-tab comes into contact with oxygen, it burns, giving off a green-colored flame. Once we have the flame going, we'll add the kerosene fuel into the Merlin chamber, and the engine ramps up to full power. Now, if you pay close attention, you might see the green flash as the second stage engine ignites following stage separation about 2.5 minutes into flight. Topping off helium into pressure vessels on both stages is also underway. This is used to pressurize the tanks in flight as propellant is pulled out by the Merlin turbopumps. On board the spacecraft, the astronauts are monitoring systems while propellant is loaded onto the Falcon 9. Again, as Megan had mentioned, the crew training in the simulator included playbacks of sounds recorded in the Dragon capsule during recent flights, so this should be, the sounds that the astronauts are hearing should be sort of familiar. Range and weather, again, as they have been all night, are really tracking green. We're really continuing to report no problems, and there really is a very low probability of violation for weather. As a reminder, today is an instantaneous launch window, so at this point, if we hear a hold for any reason, we'll have to stand down, and our target backup launch opportunity tomorrow night, just under 24 hours from tonight's planned launch. For now, let's turn it over to Jesse and Dan for an overview of events after liftoff.
Great. Thanks, Andy. Again, always great news with some good weather. Just under 30 minutes to T0 today. So for Crew 4, the astronauts' flight to station will take about 16 hours.
And as we await that launch time, just about 29.5 minutes from now, the ground operations teams are doing a series of system checks, ensuring that both Dragon and Falcon 9 are ready for launch. And you're looking now just over the shoulders of our team out at the Cape there as they prepare for liftoff. As we wait for the launch clock to hit 0, though, we wanted to give you a quick overview of what the ascent portion of this mission is going to look like.
Once we hit T0 and a successful launch occurs, we will watch Falcon 9 and Dragon lift off from historic launch pad 39A and make their ascent.
One of the first things that happens about 50 seconds into the flight, those 9 Merlin engines will throttle down as the rocket passes through the period of maximum dynamic pressure. That's max Q. It's really the maximum amount of stress that the vehicle is going to hit on its way uphill. Also worth noting, when we hit max Q, the vehicle will be going supersonic.
Once we are through that period of maximum dynamic pressure, we can throttle down our 9 Merlin engines again. And from there, at about 2.5 minutes into flight, we have a series of 3 events that will happen in rapid succession.
Yeah, all just right on top of each other. The first one's MECO, or main engine cutoff. That's where all 9 of those Merlin 1D engines shut off in preparation for stage separation, which is the second event. This is where the first stage detaches from the second. The first stage starts to make its way back to Earth for a landing, as the second stage ignites its engine and continues its journey with that third event, that engine ignition. It's called SES-1, or second stage engine start number 1. That's where we'll see the MVAC engine light up and propel the second stage along with the Crew 4 astronauts into orbit.
And as Stage 2 heads towards its targeted drop-off orbit, Stage 1 will execute 2 burns in order to make its way back down to Earth. The first is the entry burn, and that's where 3 of the 9 M1D engines will reignite and then shut down again. Now that helps to slow the stage down in preparation for re-entry back into the Earth's atmosphere.
And while the first stage is heading back towards Earth, again, that second stage, it just continues to carry them into orbit until it cuts off. It's 1 Merlin engine that was ignited after stage separation. And once that happens, we wait for the call out and the confirmation of what's called a good orbital insertion, just essentially they're where we expect them to be in outer space.
About 90 seconds after Dragon gets into orbit, Falcon 9 will land back on Earth. Now, the landing burn is just a single engine burn, and that's powerful enough to bring the vehicle's speed down rapidly in order to touch down and land on our drone ship about 9.5 minutes into the mission.
And while Falcon 9's first stage is landing, Dragon is just getting ready to separate from the second stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. It takes about 3 minutes after we get on orbit, and we just wait for the vehicle to cancel out any rates, essentially make sure everything's nice and stable before the two spacecraft separate. We should get a great view from the second stage of Dragon's trunk as it flies free. Once Dragon is a short distance away, it starts going into a number of checkouts immediately, looking at some of those Draco maneuvering thrusters. There's 12 around the service section of Dragon. Those are the first ones that get checked out. And they'll also increase that separation distance from Falcon 9's second stage. These are not the Super Dracos. Those are disabled as soon as we hit this point on orbit. They're only used in an abort scenario. Once we're in outer space, those are disabled for the remainder of the mission.
About 40 seconds after separation, Dragon's nose cone deploy sequence will begin. It will take roughly 4 minutes for the nose cone hooks to unlatch and open, and that exposes its guidance navigation controls, or GNC, that will help Dragon autonomously fly to the space station.
And once that nose cone's deployed, the remaining 4 Draco thrusters on the forward bulkhead get checked out, and from there it's about 16 hours for Dragon to go through the rendezvous and approach phases, undergoing a number of what's called phasing burns as it makes its way to the station, just essentially raising its orbit and chasing down the orbiting lab.
Stage 2, cryohelium loading.
And so all of that's going to be coming up soon. Let's check back in with Chelsea over at Mission Control Houston. Chelsea?
Hey, thanks, Dan. Flight controllers here in Mission Control are laser focused on the onboard systems of the space station, making sure it's ready to receive the Dragon vehicle later tonight. They'll also be making sure that all communication links between the station, Dragon, and the ground are working properly. The consensus is that everything is proceeding nominally. Teams here in Mission Control Houston, the team in Hawthorne, and the astronauts aboard the space station will monitor the autonomous docking of the Dragon spacecraft tonight. They'll perform a series of leak checks, then work to open the hatches both on the Dragon side and inside the station's pressurized mating adapter. We expect hatch opening to take place about an hour and a half after docking. Once on board, the astronauts will be greeted by Space Station Commander Tom Marshburn, and the whole space station crew will join in for welcoming remarks to the new crew members. From there on out, they will no longer be referred to as Crew 4, as we're calling them today, but rather flight engineers of the International Space Station. Here in Mission Control, Flight Director Anthony Varia is on console overseeing the team for launch, and Audie Boulos will be on console for docking. But we'll be on air continuously through Crew 4's arrival, but launch coverage of docking is expected around 8:15 p.m. Eastern. And that's it for Mission Control. I'll toss it back to the team in Florida. Daryl, I'm excited for launch. How's it looking?
All right, thank you, Chelsea, and so are we. We're looking great weather-wise here. Range is green, weather is green, and well, we're green and ready to go for this launch. We are just T-minus 23 minutes and counting from the launch of Crew 4, the 4th astronaut rotation mission to the International Space Station under NASA's Commercial Crew Program. And it's going to be a good one, folks. The 4 astronauts are strapped in: Commander Chell Lindgren, pilot Bob Hines, and mission specialists Jessica Watkins and Samantha Cristoforetti. They are strapped into their seats inside Crew Dragon Freedom. And we can see a live shot of their rocket as we look to the screen right now. That is the Falcon 9. The rocket fueling operation is well underway. The launch escape system is armed, and that means Crew Dragon is prepared to launch itself away from the Falcon 9 rocket in case of an emergency on the pad or even after liftoff. So far, operations look and sound as expected. We are counting down to that liftoff at 3:52 and 55 seconds in the morning, Eastern Daylight Time. And so far, everything has looked right on.
It has. It's wonderful to see just 22 minutes and 32 seconds remaining on the clock. I'm starting to get really excited.
When you were sitting inside that spacecraft, how did you feel?
Well, at that point, you are really focused. You are, you've sort of stopped with the chit-chat and the storytelling, and you are very much watching the progress of the propellant loading, knowing that the time is counting down, and you're just really starting to get your head in the game and be ready for what's happening next.
It's a very serious part of the countdown is that propellant flowing in. You can see those systems as you're looking on your screen and monitoring them. The mission is the continuation of rotational crew flights to the International Space Station from U.S. soil on private rockets and spacecraft. And this would not be possible without the success of NASA SpaceX Demo 2, the test flight 2 years ago, if you can believe it, the safe delivery and return of Crews 1 and 2. And of course, Crew 2 back on Earth 6 months ago, and that's why we have with us the pilot from Crew 2, Megan MacArthur. Appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. It's hard to believe it. I've been home for 6 months already and launched almost a year ago, but time travels. Flying. Yeah, it keeps moving.
It was 6 months that you were up in space. Do you notice that you were in space like now? Have you, the symptoms of having been up in space for that long completely passed? Or?
I would say they're 90% back to Earth normal. And, there's some lingering things like back pain and, some joint pain and things like that will pop up that, I go, well, am I just older now or is Earth just harder? But for the most part, back to normal.
Very good. Well, you've done a wonderful job for us tonight, and we appreciate it. As we continue to count down, we're looking for the next call out, which should be stage 2 RP1 load complete. It'll be followed by strong back chill has begun, and then we'll start loading stage 2 with liquid oxygen.
Stage 2 RP1 load is complete.
You can see the condensation coming off the rocket, that super chilled LOX, chilling down everything, including the skin of the rocket, so that it condenses the humid Florida air, and you see there the clouds are coming off, but at the very top it's also venting. T-minus 19 minutes, 40 seconds and counting.
It's an impressive sight. I forget that I can also look over my shoulder and see it in real life.
In fact, you just did that. We can't see you on camera, but Megan turned and wanted to see that it was the same thing she's looking at on screen, and indeed it is. We are bringing you live pictures of the launch of Crew 4 from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Liftoff time 3:52 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. If you're just joining us, we want to tell you a little bit about the crew on board. Dr. Kjell Lindgren is the commander. He was born in Taipei, Taiwan, but spent most of his childhood overseas in England. He is married with 3 children. He was an instructor and jump master with the U.S. Air Force Academy, and he also has a doctorate in medicine. He served as a NASA flight surgeon and then as an astronaut aboard Soyuz, where he spent 141 days in space during Expedition 44 and 45. And as I mentioned, today he is the commander of Crew Dragon. Sitting next to him is his pilot, Bob Hines, who was born in Fayetteville, North Carolina. There he is. He's married with 3 daughters. He has a Master of Science degree in aerospace engineering and served 21 years in the U.S. Air Force as a test pilot and as a fighter pilot in the F-15E. He came to NASA as a research pilot, but today he's the Crew 4 pilot for Crew Dragon Freedom. A fine commander and pilot, you understand the role of pilot very well. You served it in Crew 2.
That's right. The pilot's role is largely to help the commander keep track of what's going on with the systems, any off-nominal conditions, while the pilot is monitoring where the vehicle is and where it's going. So you work very closely together.
Jessica Watkins is one of our 2 mission specialists, and she considers Lafayette, Colorado her hometown. Her college rugby team won the national championship in 2008. She's a geologist who completed several internships with NASA, including one testing system designs for the Mars Perseverance rover. She became an astronaut in 2017, one of the many turtles that are going around here at the NASA astronaut crew team. She's going up into space for the very first time as a mission specialist. The second mission specialist is Samantha Cristoforetti. She was born in Milan, Italy. She has 2 children. She's a fighter pilot, and in 2013, Cristoforetti launched into space aboard a Soyuz for a long-duration spaceflight to the International Space Station. Several years later, she was awarded the Knight Grand Cross of the Order of Merit from the President of Italy, and today she returns to space with Crew 4, 2 fine mission specialists. Now, each of these 4 crew members will be a part of Expedition 67 once they arrive at the International Space Station. If you are here locally and watching this broadcast and want to step away from the screen,
lock load has begun.
Just heard the call out for Stage 2 prop load. As I was mentioning, if you're listening to the radio, you can find the launch coverage on the frequencies you see at the bottom of your screen, VH radio frequency 146.940 on the megahertz scale, and UHF radio at 444.925 in the FM mode on the megahertz scale. All of that can be heard rather, here on the Space Coast. Megan, let's talk a little bit about your science. Your team spent 199 days in space, a record, you call it 200, a SpaceX record for an entire crew of astronauts. With all that time spent on board Space Station, can you explain how Space Station acts as that orbiting laboratory where Crew 4 is heading right now?
Absolutely. So the Space Station is obviously a very unique environment, right? It's long-term access to micro-G environment that scientists can't replicate or simulate accurately here on Earth. So it's the ability to run these experiments that teach us fundamental things about the physics of fluid mechanics, about combustion, things that we can't, again, replicate on Earth that can lead to discoveries that can benefit us in space but can also benefit us back on Earth, like understanding diseases well enough to create new treatments for them, or understanding combustion in a new way to allow us to build cleaner burning engines.
You mentioned some of the science that you've worked on. What was the most impressive and stands out to you in your mind?
Well, it's hard to choose a favorite, but of course one that is always popular is one you get to eat. So we got to participate in the Plant Habitat 4 experiment, where we grew chili peppers that hailed from Hatch, New Mexico. And so we got to monitor them over a period of many months. It was a fruiting plant that took a long time to germinate and to fruit. And for long duration missions, we'll provide an important vitamin C and other minerals for crews on long duration missions. And they were also just really tasty. So that was a lot of fun.
That's a bonus. And, growing plants in space is part of deeper space exploration, especially growing them in mass amounts, right? So that you can feed a crew.
Absolutely right. It'll be an important part of those future missions.
Crew 4 will fly aboard a brand new Daragon capsule, by the way, that the astronauts named Freedom. But the booster has flown 3 previous times, and there you can see it there with the sooty-covered NASA meatball right above them. That's Crew 4 below, standing next to their booster. This flight will be the 4th for that booster, which is a first for NASA and ESA astronauts. Now, at the time that booster lights and takes that crew into space, the International Space Station will be 260 miles over Western Romania. We talked a little bit earlier about chasing down station. Well, when this thing lights, Crew 4 will then spend the next 16 hours chasing down the International Space Station for a rendezvous at 8:15 this evening. And there's a special guest there. That is an Apollo astronaut, Harrison Schmitt. He is a moonwalker, you may recall. One of the 12 men who walked on the moon. He launched on the night of December 7th, 1972, from the same launch pad we're using tonight, pad 39A. And then 3 days later, Schmitt and Commander Gene Cernan landed on the moon. What an honor to have him watching tonight. He, a geologist, watching another geologist, Jessica Watkins, going up to space today, so they share that. And Harrison Schmitt, one of the 4 surviving astronauts who walked on the moon. Buzz Aldrin, David Scott, Charlie Duke, and Harrison Schmitt. And they are a national treasure. Megan, we are T-minus 12 minutes and counting. Some final thoughts as we get ready to light this candle for, by the way, Samantha Cristoforetti's birthday was yesterday.
Yes.
What What a big birthday candle.
That's right. It's a pretty good birthday celebration, I think.
She's going to enjoy that. But what will they experience the moment of liftoff?
The moment of liftoff is really, it's hard to describe. I've heard it described as lots of different things. A kick in the pants, someone hits your chair with a baseball bat. It's almost indescribable because you start moving so fast and you're accelerating so fast the whole time that it's just a sensory overload. You're really, really moving fast. And on our crew, people enjoyed that very much. There was a lot of hooting and laughing basically in response to that. And as the rocket changes its speed, it accelerates down and then back up again. You feel all of that, and it's a tremendous ride.
Astronauts from Crew 4 getting ready to experience that. We're about to watch this launch. So at T-minus 11 minutes and 25 seconds, let's toss it to Andy at SpaceX in California.
Daryl, Megan, thank you so much. It's getting more and more exciting here as we are just about 11 minutes until liftoff. Things are still looking great for both Falcon 9 and Dragon. Falcon 9 began loading propellants at the T-minus 35-minute mark. We should finish around the T-minus 2-minute mark. Right now, densified liquid oxygen is loading and continuing on the first stage. And again, this is going to wrap up around the T-minus 2-minute mark. The Dragon mission director and team are reporting no issues. Communication checkouts are complete. The crew access arm is retracted. The launch escape system is armed and the crew is strapped in and ready to go. Final instructions to the crew come in at the T-minus 10-minute mark. The crew displays will be configured for launch. The setup gives the crew insight into how the launch is proceeding and provides constant update on vehicle health. At T-minus 5 minutes, we'll be in terminal count and the Dragon will transition to internal power. And we'll hear continued callouts on the countdown nets as we get closer and closer to liftoff. Range and weather are both green. Right now I am joined by Dan. Dan, after ascent, we're going to hear some callouts for different types of abort modes, right?
Yeah, that's right. On the way uphill, you'll hear...
SpaceX, please confirm crew displays are configured for launch.
Freedom confirms. Displays are configured for launch.
SpaceX copies Crew 4, and on behalf of the entire SpaceX team, we're honored to have you aboard Dragon Capsule Freedom today. It has been a privilege working together to prepare for this launch to the International Space Station. We wish you a great mission, good luck, Godspeed, and time to let freedom fly.
Copy SpaceX. We'd like to take this opportunity to extend our thanks to our NASA, SpaceX, international partner teams, and most of all our families for getting us to the threshold of this amazing opportunity to launch to the International Space Station with Kennedy Space Center. A heartfelt thank you to every one of you that made this possible. Now let's let Falcon roar and freedom ring.
Okay, so crew displays are configured. The crew just reported they're good to go. They're ready to launch. Saw a couple of fist bumps there. But yeah, as you mentioned, we'll hear a couple of different call-outs on the way uphill, a combination letter and a number. You'll hear 1A right at liftoff, and these just correspond to the different abort modes. There's 2 for the first stage, and then A through E for the second stage, and these are telling the crew essentially which direction Dragon's going to be pointing when it performs a burn of those Super Draco engines. Also gives you an idea of where they're likely to come down if we have an abort on the way uphill. But you'll hear those throughout the flight uphill. You'll also hear a number of call-outs from some of the key positions on the Falcon 9 team, the guidance, navigation, and control officer, and also the prop lead. And we're going to be looking to hear trajectory nominal, propulsion nominal, just as we make that flight uphill. It's going to be about a 9-minute trip from ground to orbit. And right now we're just 8 minutes away. And we've got a couple more events coming up starting at right around 7 minutes. Right, Andy?
Yeah, in about 50 seconds at T-minus 7 minutes, we're going to begin engine chill on the first stage engine. This is where we inject a small amount of super chilled liquid oxygen into the Merlin engine turbopumps before letting the full flow of LOX during ignition. So we do this in order to make sure that we don't shock the engines because liquid oxygen is so cold. We actually do the same exact things for the second stage engine, and that happens during ascent, but we should hear the call out after liftoff for that as well. And again, that is coming up in about 15 seconds, and we should hear the call outs over the nets.
Stage 1 engine chill has started.
And that was the call out. So again, a small amount of super chilled liquid oxygen being flowed into the Merlin engine turbopumps. Those 9 Merlin engines on the bottom of the first stage.
All right, now we've got a couple more events coming up. Right at about T-minus 6 minutes, so in 40 seconds from now, our next prop load milestone will be complete. We'll have all of the RP1, the fuel for stage 1, fully on board. It's at about 99% right now, so we should hear that any moment. After that, we'll hear a number of call-outs related to the Dragon flight computer figure for terminal count, and then move on to internal power.
RP1 load is complete.
And then we hear the RP1 load is complete, so we got that a little early. So all of the RP1, the refined kerosene, is on board the Falcon 9, both the first stage just completing. We already heard that the second stage completed a short time ago. Coming up, we're going to hear the call out for Dragon to transition to configure for terminal count, and then transition over to internal power. And then we'll hear the propellant tanks on Falcon 9 getting ready to pressurize, adding some additional rigidity and structural support as we get ready for the strong back to retract. It'll move just a couple of degrees at first, and then we'll see it swing open completely at the moment of liftoff. And that strong back providing access to Falcon 9. It's also providing all of the fueling lines and umbilicals for both prop load and all of the different gases being loaded on board the vehicle. So those are coming up. We're going to continue to check through a couple more fueling milestones as well. The final one we're going to hear is at just 2 minutes before flight, when we get the liquid oxygen finished on board that second stage.
Dragon is in configure for terminal count. Falcon 9 tanks are pressurizing for strong back retract.
So that call out that we just heard, Falcon 9 is beginning to pressurize for the strong back retract. So if you look closely on the left-hand side of your screen, or excuse me, the left-hand side of the vehicle, there is a large truss structure. That is the strong back. We have some clamp arms just at the bottom of Dragon. In about...
Retract sequence has started. Stand by for alarm.
Well, right now, those clamp arms are beginning to open up. You can see them right behind all of the white clouds around the vehicle. Once that is fully open, then the strong back structure will retract away to its pre-launch position about 2 degrees away from the vehicle. And as we get closer to T0, it will continue to recline back to make room for Falcon 9 and Dragon to lift off and clear the launch pad.
همو قسمی که برای تصویر میبینین 3 دقیقه و 50-49-48 ثانیه تا پرتاب موشک فالکن 9 با ماژول دراگن اسپس ایکس باقی مانده و در این سفر فضایی 4 فضانورد قرار است به ایستگاه بین المللی فضایی سفر کنند.
15 seconds. So you can see on screen that strong back is beginning to recline away from Dragon and Falcon.
All right, now loading that.
راکت در حال جدا شدن از سکوی پرتاب است و همه چیز آماده است تا موشک از روی سکو جدا شده و به سمت فضا حرکت کنه. دوستان متوجه باشند که این پرواز یا این حرکت از ایستگاه کنیدی در ایالت فلوریدای آمریکا انجام میشه. کرو چهار نام میشن یا عملیات پرتاب جدید است که از طرف شرکت فضایی ناسا و شرکت فضایی اسپس ایکس مربوط به ایلان ماسک، ثروتمندترین مرد دنیا، این پروژه به صورت مشترک انجام میشه از شهر فلوریدای ایالات متحده امریکا. حدود یک دقیقه تا پرتاب موشک به سمت ایستگاه بین المللی فضایی. از شما دوستا و همراهان عزیز خواهش میکنم ویدیوی لایف را با دوستان خود شریک کنید و آهسته آهسته نزدیک میشیم به شمارش معکوس و همانطور که در سمت راست تصویر خود میبینید فضانوردان در داخل اتاقک یا همون ماژول آماده هستند، کمربندها بسته، کلاهها بر سر، کیسه های هوا وصل شده و آماده پرواز هستند. 28 27 26 25 24 ثانیه 23 ثانیه. از نظرات و کامنت های همه شما عزیزان بسیار بسیار تشکر میکنیم. بله، موشک پرتاب شد. شما بیننده حرکت موشک به سمت فضا هستید. میبینید که چه حرارت و چه بخار و چه دودی از خود بر جای گذاشته و با قدرت تمام و با شتاب تمام به سمت فضا در حرکت است. میبینید که چه سوخت مصرف میکنه، سوخت های جامد و سوخت های که دوام و مقاومت بسیار بالایی دارن. در موشک های فضایی استفاده میشه. 680 کیلومتر 700 کیلومتر در 1 ساعت، واقعا سرعت بسیار بالایی است. 870 کیلومتر در ساعت، 900 کیلومتر در ساعت، 1000 کیلومتر در ساعت. موشک بیشتر از 1000 کیلومتر در 1 ساعت حرکت میکنه. 1100. هزار و 400 کیلومتر، 1500 کیلومتر در ساعت. سرعت موشک به سمت فضا و خارج شدن از جو زمین تا 1800 1900 کیلومتر در ساعت، 2000 کیلومتر. واقعا سرعت باور نکردنی است. و امیدوار هستیم این حرکت و این پرواز موفقانه انجام شود و موشک از جو زمین خارج شده و در فضا قرار بگیره. 3400 کیلومتر. دانشمندان ناسا به خاطر تعقیب کردن موشک تا خارج شدن از جو زمین، همانطوری که در تصویر میبینین، بسیار کمره ها و دوربین های قدرتمندی را در اطراف سکوی پرتاب نصب میکنن و احتمالاً ماژول بخش اول راکت از ماژول جدا شد. سرعت موشک تا 6000 کیلومتر رسیده. دوربین هایی که در نقاط مختلف راکت نصب شده سمت راست و چپ تصویر میبینید که از لحظات متفاوت حرکت موشک تصویربرداری میکنند. بله، از جو زمین خارج شده و در فضا قرار گرفته. تا حالا که این پرواز موفقیت آمیز بوده.
Freedom copies, nominal trajectory.
That was our guidance, navigation, and control officer. Nominal trajectory. Dragon's pointed in the right direction, continuing its flight to orbit. We heard Bermuda called out. That's one of the ground stations now receiving telemetry from the Dragon as it continues its path uphill. So we'll have the dueling boxes here for a while as the first stage makes its way down. That second stage going to continue firing until about a little over 8 minutes into the flight. Doing the heavy lifting now.
The first stage has a couple of events itself in order to land on a drone ship. So at T plus 7 minutes and 25 seconds, it's going to start its entry burn. It's going to be one of two burns. This is where 3 of the 9 Merlin
Dragon,
engines
SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
on the first stage will relight and burn for about 30 seconds in order to slow the vehicle down before hitting the denser parts of the Earth's atmosphere.
Acquisition of signal, New Hampshire.
All right, now on the New Hampshire ground station, another call out there from our guidance, navigation, and control officer, nominal trajectory. Second stage continues to power. Call out just then, propulsion is nominal, the engine performing as expected. Crew pulling a little more than 1 1/4 Gs right now. Again, that's going to continue to ramp up, peaking just before we get to that second stage cutoff.
Yep, this single engine here, Dan, can produce over 220,000 pounds of thrust in the vacuum of space, so they are definitely feeling it.
And we're already about 200 kilometers in altitude.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
6 دقیقه از پرتاب موشک گذشته.
Great call out that we are headed in the direction that we need to, and we just heard from Shell, the commander.
And we should get one more of those trajectory check-ins in about 30 seconds from now, and then we'll start to hit our events in rapid succession as the first stage continues to make its way back home. The second stage will start to wrap up its job of delivering these astronauts into orbit.
از همراهی و نوشتن نظریات شما بسیار بسیار تشکر میکنیم.
Yeah, we don't.
بعد از تحولاتی که در اوکراین رخ داد، ایستگاه بین المللی فضایی که روسیه هم در او شریک است و قسمت موتورهای نگهدارنده ایستگاه فضایی توسط روسیه ساخته شده، دچار مشکلات و تحولاتی شد، اما ظاهراً مسئولان ناسا و روسیه تا حدود این موضوع را بین خود حل کردند. از همراهی شما با کانال علمی و تکنولوژی بام دنیا بسیار بسیار سپاسگزار هستیم و ما تلاش خواهیم کرد در یکی دو ویدیویی که در آینده قرار است نشر شود این موشک یا این پرتابی که امروز صورت گرفت را بیشتر توضیح بدهیم و معلومات و اطلاعات که تازه به نشر رسیده از طریق ناسا و اسپس ایکس به شما منتقل کنیم. لایک ویدیو و سابسکرایب کانال بام دنیا را فراموش نکنین. بله، موفقانه موشک دوباره به زمین برگشت. خود موشک انتقال دهنده به زمین بازگشت و به زمین نشست. همانطور که در تصویر میبینین بر روی سکوی تعیین شده کاملا سالم و دقیق فرود آمد و این هم کابین فضانوردان 1 2 3 4 نفر فضانورد همانطور که میبینید در خارج از جو زمین و در فضا قرار گرفتن. یکی در او گوشه با عروسک که همراه خود آورده بازی میکنه، همراه عروسک بازی میکنه. در جو قرار گرفته و به زودی به سمت ایستگاه بین المللی فضایی حرکت خواهد کردن. سکویی که به فضانوردا طراحی میشه بسیار ایمن، بسیار محکم، در مقابل فشار هوا با تمام امکانات هوارسانی اکسیژن و فضانوردا به سمت رو به بالا، رو به آسمان قرار میگیرن. بله، آهسته آهسته فضانوردا از کمربند و از پایبند و از اینایی که اونا را در روی صندلیشان محکم میگیرن خدا باز میکنن. این هم مدار که موشک حرکت کرده، مرحله اول، مرحله دوم و فعلا در منطقه ایستگاه فضایی بین المللی یک پروژه مشترک توسط روسیه، شرکت هوایی امریکا یا ناسا که در اواخر شرکت اسپس ایکس هم در او کارها و فعالیت های داشته و چین و شرکت فضایی اروپا به صورت مشترک شریک هستند و کار میکنند و فضانوردا، دانشمندا و محققان و نجوم شناسانی از این چند کشور یا از این مربوط به این چند شرکت در اینجا فعالیت دارند. بله دیدین همانطور که گفتم اتاقک فضانوردا بسیار مجهز پیشرفته با مانیتورهای بسیار دقیق، دماسنج ها و فشار هواسنج و همه چیز بسیار دقیق و پیشرفته تنظیم شده و دانشمندا یا فضانوردا در حال تنظیم دراگن یا همان ماژولی هست که به سمت ایستگاه فضایی در حرکت است. از اینکه همراه و بیننده ما بودید، نظریات خودتان را نوشتید و ما را همراهی کردید، به ما انرژی بخشیدید، بسیار بسیار زیاد تشکر میکنیم. به بزرگی یک کیهان و یک کهکشان از شما تشکر میکنیم و تا ویدیوی بعدی که معلومات بیشتری را در این مورد در اختیار شما قرار بدیم همراه ما باشین. من فعلا از شما خداحافظی میکنم و شما میتوانید همچنان تصاویر در روی تلفن ها و یوتیوبتان ببینین. 14-13 دقیقه از پرتاب موشک و قرار گرفتن فضانوردا در مدار سپری شده.
Up to the crew on board Freedom, Shell radioing down their thanks for the smooth ride to orbit. So, as Andy said, we've got about 16 hours.
And Freedom, SpaceX can confirm nominal dehumidifier activation and service section Draco checkouts.
Okay, Freedom copies. Equals activation complete. We're going to go visors up.
And that call from the core here in Hawthorne.
Core copies, your go.
Indicating that we had good checkouts of those 12 Draco thrusters around the service section. There's 4 to go after we get the nose cone open and the ECLIS, the environmental control and life support system, activated and running inside Dragon. Crew will be able to get their visors open and pretty soon get out of their suits and settle in for a 16-hour ride to the space station. So, with Crew 4 now successfully on orbit, let's head over to our counterparts at the Kennedy Space Center. It looked great on TV. I'm sure it was even better in person. Daryl, Megan, how are things over there on the ground?
Well, thank you very much, Dan, and you're absolutely right. It was phenomenal here at the Kennedy Space Center watching the launch of Crew 4. Wow, Megan MacArthur, NASA astronaut, pilot for Crew 2, and she's been on the space shuttle. You got to watch that launch, and I saw you taking it in.
It was spectacular. It really was wonderful to see a launch up close again, a night launch, which has been a while since I've seen one in person. Just spectacular. It never gets old. I think if it gets old, you're probably in the wrong business.
Absolutely. It was so loud, so powerful. The roar of the engines when it lifted off, it seemed louder than usual, but that just might be because of the atmospherics. And then that light off the water, what a beautiful sight. Not only were we watching, but also crew on station tuned in to the NASA TV broadcast, watching them lift off as they await for them to arrive tonight at 8:15.
That's right. I know they're excited for lots of reasons. One, they're going to get to see their friends, and they're going to get to come home themselves. So they're looking forward to it.
All right. Well, Megan, thank you for your thoughts on that. And we also have a very special guest who watched the launch with us here at the Kennedy Space Center. Let's get over to Megan Cruz, who is with one of the astronauts who walked on the moon almost 50 years ago. Megan?
Yeah, I am really honored to be standing next to Apollo astronaut Harrison Schmitt. I really cannot believe I'm standing next to you. It really is an honor.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm happy I'm here.
Oh, well, we're so thrilled to have you here. And actually, we're going to pull up some old photos of you. Why don't we take a trip down memory lane?
Hey, why not?
So for those who don't know, Harrison was the last person to step on the moon with Apollo 17 in 1972. What picture are we looking at right here?
Well, this is the crew, Ron Evans, Gene Cernan, myself. This is sort of the publicity shot with the lunar rover. We were the third mission to have a lunar rover that we drove around on the surface of the moon. We actually landed in a valley deeper than the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
And the rover enabled us to visit both sides of the valley, and really just had not only a great time, but tremendous scientific return.
How does it feel to look back on these pictures? There's you on the moon there. To look back on these pictures and to be standing here 50 years later and you just watched Crew 4 launch.
Well, of course, I'm happy to be standing here 50 years later. And the launch of the Falcon 9 and the Dragon to the International Space Station was spectacular. Those of us that rode a Saturn V into space, are a little bit jaded about the smaller rockets, but still, it really was something. And on board was a geologist, Jessica Watkins.
Yes, you got your special invite today from Jessica. What do you think about that?
That's great. Jessica and I have worked a little bit in Houston with the lunar samples,